Hey there, YouTube. I have a video up already about, well, partly about what they're doing in Africa with the HIV studies and the idea that circumcision could possibly prevent HIV. It wasn't very in-depth as far as what the theory is behind why they're doing these studies. The foreskin is a protective organ. It's mucosal tissue on the inside, which is a soft, delicate tissue, and it has immunological cells in it. So the foreskin is actually designed to protect against pathogens. So these particular cells are called Langerhans cells. And their job is to run around and collect bacteria and viruses and the like. The hypothesis is that if you remove these immune cells, the HIV will not have something to grab onto, essentially, because the way that HIV works in its ingenious little fashion is that it grabs the cell that's supposed to get rid of it. Okay, that's why it's such a big bad virus, right? So, at this point I should say that the studies that are being done are not to prove this hypothesis. The study was just, let's chop a bunch off and see how fast people get HIV. It's really, really, really bad science, and there's so much to be said about it and so much to know about what they're doing, and if you're a layman, you don't understand studies, and you don't understand what proper science is supposed to do, and so you basically have to trust either the critics or the praise of what you hear about particular science, and that really puts us at a disadvantage, which is why I really recommend that people abandon their blind trust in things that they don't understand, unless you hear a very concise explanation of what it is that's going on, and unless it's broken down into facts that you do understand and that you can figure out for yourself. You know, don't trust it just as they go, oh, circumcision prevents HIV 60%. It's like, what does that mean, 60%? Where do you get that figure? Why do you say that? And, you know, the truth about these studies that they're doing is oftentimes they stop them when the numbers look right, because it's only about numbers. So something to consider when you hear that circumcision will help prevent HIV is that it's because the foreskin is immunological. So what that means is when you remove the foreskin, you remove those protective cells. And okay, fine, sometimes that's what we do to protect ourselves. I mean, chemotherapy, for an example, which I'm not a big fan of and don't believe I would opt for myself, but the idea is you poison the body. You poison the body to the point where you kill off what you want to get rid of, and you take that hit, basically. And, you know, that's a pretty serious thing for somebody to consider for themselves. And they do that when it's absolutely necessary, when you have a life threat. But to take that hit, so to speak, and to remove somebody's part of their body that is there for their protection is a pretty serious thing, especially when there's no immediate threat. You know, I mean, you're talking about an infant. Infants aren't having sex and exposing themselves to HIV. And two, what about 99% of all other things that those particular protective cells would be protecting against? You know, I mean, syphilis doesn't hijack your immune system. No, gonorrhea doesn't hijack your immune system, but that's what those cells are there to protect against. And, you know, outside regular, everyday contaminant type things, you know, to prevent regular infection. So that's a loss, and as long as there's a loss, then you've got something to be weighed. And if you've got something serious like that to be weighed, not to mention just the loss of a body part, regardless of whether or not it has function, you know, it's just not really moral to make that choice for another individual. So there is another, I guess it's a hypothesis. I don't know that the people who are actually doing this study in Africa have this hypothesis in mind, but I have heard it said, so I'll address it, about the keratinization of the tissue that's left on the penis after circumcision. I've made mention of this in a couple of my other videos, but I'll go ahead and explain it again. Because the inner foreskin and the head of the penis are mucosal tissue, they're very thin and delicate tissue. When you remove the protection of that tissue, the skin responds to the drying out and to the abrasion, constant abrasion of cloth and things like that. It responds by growing new layers of skin and highly keratinizing that skin. The process is actually technically a callousing. It doesn't seem like a callus. Men don't think their dicks are callous, of course, but technically that's what's happening. Keratin is what makes your hair and your nails hard, and so it's firmer. And the idea is that because it's a tougher type of skin, that it will not crack or not get tiny little tears in it as easily, and so therefore not let the virus in. HIV, right. There's a few things wrong with this idea. Nobody is studying whether or not keratinized mucosal tissue versus natural mucosal tissue lets in or doesn't the HIV, or in sex, does it or does it not get tiny tears or cracks. They're not studying that. They're just saying that and then moving on as if it were fact. When the people who want to push circumcision and say that it's such a fantastic thing insist that there's no difference in sensation and that, you know, it doesn't affect a man's sexual pleasure and stuff like that. And so when you're talking about sexual pleasure, no, there's no change. But then when you're talking about something like HIV, then it's like, oh, well, it keratinizes and it's thicker, so it's not going to crack as easy. So it's, you know, it's like they want their cake and to eat it too. Circumcision changes the way a man has sex. Because of the keratinization and the sheltering of his nerves, he needs more stimulation. I think of the little fable or whatever about the oak tree and the blade of grass. And the oak tree is like so strong, and the blade of grass is so weak, and then the storm comes along and blows the oak tree over, and the grass is like, I have to bend with the wind, you know. And so, you know, stiff isn't always necessarily better. I mean, stiffer and firmer and harder doesn't necessarily mean it's going to withstand better. I mean, soft and pliable when you're having sex might just be better, you know, than drier and rougher. Standardizing the removal of a body part from everybody to prevent a percentage of a disease on a whole, when you include behavior and you include society and you include all of those confounding factors, we already know what the effect is, and the truth is that's not effective for us. If you support genital integrity activism, if you're just interested in some of the stuff I have to say, please subscribe. Thank you so much again for watching, and have a great day.